Hello and welcome back. I'm Alexandra Marchewicz. Welcome to The Bottom Line, where we break down the most pressing economic and business issues of the day. Now, as the EU plans to wean itself off Russian energy by 2027, Central and Eastern European countries find themselves on a critical juncture in the energy transition. And today we'll dive into how these nations are navigating the complex path to energy independence and what the future holds for the region. And joining me to do so is Maria Holzner, the director at the Vienna Institute for International Economic Studies. Hello, sir, and welcome to TVP World.
Thank you very much. Hello.
So I would love to start now with what is happening in the CEE, but mainly Austria. Now, Austria's dependence on Russian gas has actually increased in recent years. So what factors actually have contributed to this rise, and why has Austria been unable to diversify its energy sources like other CEE countries?
It was mentioned in the previous spot on the topic that Austria has a very long-run contract with Gazprom, and also there has, at least so far, been no political will to quit. There is now finally a commission that is investigating into this kind of private contract between the Austrian energy company and Gazprom, but this comes obviously quite late. So far, no alternatives in terms of, for instance, new infrastructure have been tapped into. There are, though, potential contracts where Austria could draw on Norwegian gas, for instance, through Germany, or other gas sources through Italian pipelines in the case of emergency. However, this could cover probably only about a third of total Austrian needs in terms of gas. So I guess the idea was to draw as long as possible on the relatively cheaper Russian gas. Moreover, given that the countries further to the east, such as Hungary, for instance, the Slovak Republic, are doing similar things, and as long as obviously also Ukraine is forwarding gas through the Druzhba pipeline that also runs via Ukrainian territory, and also Ukraine, maybe not in aggregate, but in terms of managing regional gas supply, also partly needs these Russian gas deliverers still. So it's a mix of domestic and overall Central European factors. And after all, Austria, Hungary, Slovakia, these are landlocked countries. It's not that easy without the harbor to draw on additional LNG deliveries. However, for instance, the Czech Republic managed to get out of Russian gas altogether.
So having in mind what you just said, and you mentioned numerous elements of this puzzle, now what is the strategy to end this reliance on Russia? What Austria plans to do in that regard?
Well, there is a mix of measures that typically all the countries in the region apply, increasing renewable resources, for instance, solar power, wind power, and otherwise importing energy, maybe also in different forms. So the overall consumption of gas was reduced. There is a certain possibility to substitute gas for other forms of energy. These are the things that have been done in Austria so far, but overall, it's not enough to really overcome, at least in the short run, the reliance on Russian gas.
Now, having that in mind, so how realistic is the scenario really, that the things that you just outlined, how realistic is it that it can be achieved in the nearest future?
Well, I assume that the Austrian energy company has some contingency plans, because one important element is that Ukraine has announced that it will stop deliveries of Russian energy via its territory altogether. Now, whether that is really going to happen, it's difficult to say, but obviously there must be some contingency plans in how to deal with such a situation that could happen fairly early. From today's perspective, it would be very difficult to perform. It might then involve also reductions in deliveries to certain large-scale consumers in industry, for instance.
So now looking at the future of independence of Europe from Russian energy, I wonder, because you mentioned Slovakia and Hungary, so I would love to pause here for a moment, because there seems to be a dispute really within the EU with countries like Hungary and Slovakia rejecting alternative routes for oil supplies. So what are the main concerns driving this resistance, to your mind?
Well, it's obviously also a matter of costs. It is a matter of construction of appropriate infrastructure that, again, is very costly. Moreover, it's becoming more and more difficult to construct large-scale infrastructure in Europe. There is this mentality, not in my backyard. So everyone would like large for instance, energy infrastructure, but also transport infrastructure to be constructed at the neighbor's plot, but not at home. Actually, Europe as a whole needs massive construction of energy infrastructure to connect the huge potentials for wind power in the north with the huge potentials for solar power in the south, and in order to manage basically these electricity flows, because what we have at the moment is that we lose actually huge amounts of wind electricity that was generated in the North Sea on the shore of the Baltic Sea, because we simply do not have the appropriate interconnectors to, for instance, also the areas in Central Europe where the big industry is, the energy-intensive production of chemicals and so on, manufacturing, that would consume also this energy. So I think it will be crucial for Europe as a whole to have all these interconnections of energy infrastructure as soon as possible. The question is, why didn't we have started already in 2022 when we knew that this will be a decisive issue for the future of Europe's industry?
Oh, certainly. And we do see that some countries are trying to take the matter into their own hands. And I feel like one of these countries is Romania. It is poised to become a key player in the region's energy landscape with the development of the Neptune's deep gas field. So how significant is this project for Romania, and what impact could it have on the region's energy security overall?
It's interesting to note that the key player is, again, the Austrian energy company OMV, that is active in exploiting the assumed large natural gas fields, offshore gas fields in the Black Sea, in the aquatorium of Romania. Altogether, this is not negligible. However, the assumed annual deliveries from that gas field are probably something around 8 billion cubic meters of gas annually, and that would be just a few percentage points of total EU demand for gas. It would be a little bit more than what Austria, for instance, consumes per year in terms of gas. So it's not like nothing. At the margin, it's important, but it will not be a game changer altogether. So I think we need to take this into consideration. But for instance, for some countries in Central, East, Southeast Europe, it will be a relief that in a few years we might receive gas deliveries from the Black Sea. However, there are obviously a lot of caveats. There are environmental concerns. There are also security concerns. Floating sea mines in the Black Sea from the Russo-Ukraine war are an issue, for instance, and so on. So it's not an easy task, but it will certainly help, at least at the margin, to overcome certain pressures in the energy markets of the region.
So now I wonder, having in mind that we are looking at the CEE region as a whole, now once, for instance, Slovakia becomes a country with the biggest share of nuclear energy in the mix, will it be awash in cheap energy, or will it still competitiveness now crowned from other CEE countries? What do you think about this?
Well, nuclear energy is one way to deal with the issue. It, however, involves in the very long run probably very high costs. So it's not an easy thing to say this is the best way to go forward. Probably decentralized production of energy with regard to wind energy, solar energy, hydropower stations need to be also increased in the overall energy mix. I wouldn't put all my bets on nuclear energy because it is very centralized. It might be vulnerable to also terrorist attacks and other earthquakes and so on, natural disasters. And it involves huge costs in the decommissioning after a few decades. So overall, countries will probably need a fair mix of alternative sources of energy in order to decarbonize.
So multi-faced approach it is. Well, thank you so much. I feel like we have to park our conversation here. Thank you so much for joining us here on TVP World.
Thank you.
And that was Maria Holzer, Director at the Vienna Institute for International Economic Studies. And that is the bottom line for today. And remember that in the world of business, the bottom line is the only line that counts. Alexandra Marchewicz signing off. Goodbye.